Good morning and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View. Now this morning we're going to listen to Neil Lennon, who's been talking about Callum McGregor, and a lot of people on the live last night were talking about the fact that they reckon that Callum McGregor's not playing at his best at the moment, and so does Neil Lennon. He thinks he should be maybe playing further up the pitch. But the big news from yesterday was that wasn't released via the statement that was put out by Celtic, the press conference. It was the print media put it out this morning, and they said that Brendan Rodgers allegedly said, because we haven't heard him say it in word, he was talking about players that have came in that could be going straight back out, and he said there was players in the summer that wanted to leave Celtic. He said there was younger players who were going to come in, and it was going to be the case that we would see how they would develop. Then there was the notion, which I know was the case. There were some guys who were thinking of leaving before I came in. So there was obviously players that weren't happy with the previous manager. I think one of them was probably Matt O'Reilly. There was that offer for Matt O'Reilly during the summer. But it was interesting that he says that he knows, and you've got to remember, thinking back to the summer, that he did have that 3.5 hour lunch with Callum McGregor before he accepted the Celtic job. So was it the fact that Callum McGregor knew there were players that wanted away before Ange Postecoglou left the club? Obviously, a new manager comes in, there can be a change of heart. And they don't leave, says Brendan Rodgers. They stay, and that's how your squad ends up where it is now. So it's really interesting to see. This is probably the main reason that we brought in 9 players during the window, and the last summer window, is because Celtic were made aware by agents that players wanted to leave before the summer. So that's an interesting fact, and it maybe lets us understand the comment that Ange Postecoglou made on the last day that he was at Celtic. Said, look, the thing is, you're asking me about my next move when there's a lot of these players will leave this summer, which didn't transpire. The only ones that was left was Jota and Moy retired, and Carl Starfelt. Was that the players that wanted to leave? Were there more players that wanted to leave Celtic last summer but didn't because of the new manager that came in? Now let's move on to a previous manager, Neil Lennon, who's talking about Callum McGregor and the fact that Callum McGregor should be playing further forward.
I think some of them are ready to play. Some of the younger ones, throw them in there when the team needs results at the minute. I mean, he only made 2 changes on Wednesday night against Atletico. We brought on Phillips and Forrest late on.
Yeah.
So
Bernardo had to come on because of Hatate.
Yeah. And then, you've got Bernardo, you've got Turnbull. You could maybe look at Iwata as a holding one and maybe push McGregor forward, because sometimes I think he's a little bit wasted there.
Yeah.
Give him a bit more forward impetus, because
he has signed Yang though, and then
Yang's a winger, isn't he?
Yeah, but he's signed Yang, and then puts on Mikey Johnson.
Well, maybe he feels that he needs more time to integrate into what he wants him to do.
Now that was an interesting comment by the previous manager, that he thinks that Callum McGregor's wasted in that section of midfield. I mean, a lot of people are saying that Callum McGregor's not at his best this season. There's something missing out his game. A lot of people would like to see Callum McGregor further forward. Tell me what you think about Lennon's comments. Tell me in the comment section what you think. Is it correct what Lennon said? Would you like to see Callum McGregor being that further forward player? Would it be a good time to bring Iwata in and let Iwata sit and do his defensive midfield role that he did excellently back in Japan? You remember that he was Japanese Player of the Year before he came to Celtic as a defensive midfield player. So that's an interesting one by Lennon. I think it's something that needs to change in the middle of the park, obviously now, because Rio Hatate is not fit. It was also interesting yesterday that Brendan Rodgers spoke about the fact that this is the second time that Rio has got this type of injury, so it could be the fact that the collagen in his body, and they need to look at what he's doing outside of football also. They reckon that he's maybe not keeping himself fit enough. Is Rio Hatate one of the players that wanted away last summer and we managed to keep him? And there's obviously been a case that some players did want away. They've seen that Brendan Rodgers has came in to the club and they've had a little bit of change of heart. That maybe explains why we brought in 9 players, because the recruitment department would have been aware of the fact that there was a potential for a mass exodus, we could call it. We could call it a mass exodus from Celtic last summer. But was this all going to happen before anyone knew that Ange Postecoglou had left the club? It's all these questions that have now opened up, going back from the interview yesterday and to what Neil Lennon said today, that they would like to see Callum McGregor play further forward. It was a really interesting one from Brendan, and he's now been speaking about the fact that we have no fewer than 32 senior players in the ranks. The Northern Irishman, Brendan Rodgers, did say, he said, look, in the next couple of weeks, we will trim the squad down. The next couple of windows, we'll get the squad down. He is looking to bring in some more players that have that don't have potential, that have a little bit more experience. The availability, there's a market out there to bring in good players. It's just getting the right ones. Listen, we have enough that would say are development players. We have enough development players, said Brendan Rodgers. I think it's clear, and I love that, is we have those, but it's time for genuine quality to come to the club. We hope we can bring them across the coming windows. I think there's a bit in the background you just get from the body language and the things that Brendan Rodgers is saying, that, you know, he doesn't feel that we needed 9 development players brought in last summer. Everyone at Celtic, and well, fans anyway, didn't think that we were going to make such a huge amount of signings last summer. 9 signings wasn't needed as far as everyone was concerned when you look back to the previous couple of seasons. All we needed was a couple of players to make us better in the Champions League. Those quality players that can maybe change the game. Instead, we brought in 9 players that were project players. Brendan Rodgers says that he reckons that there'll be more players will go out in January than will come in. There'll be more going out than coming in, says Brendan Rodgers. There will be players that have been here for 6 months and won't have played. It's no fault of them. The squad is obviously a lot bigger than I would want, said Brendan Rodgers. So there will be more players we'll look out to go out and get game time. It's not ideal. I think there were younger players that were going to come in and we were going to see how they develop. I know for sure that was the case, that there were some guys thinking of leaving before I came in. Then obviously a new manager comes in, they can have a change of heart. They don't leave, then they stay. That's how your squad ends up where it is. That was an interesting comment that he made to the print media. So it's a mix up between players coming in and the ones that you want to develop and stay and not move on. Who are the players that wanted to leave? Who are the players that wanted out of Celtic last summer? That's a big question. If they want to leave, I think one player that will definitely go, if not the next window, will definitely be out next summer, is obviously David Turnbull. David Turnbull is a player that's not had much game time. He's only in the squad due to the fact of the Scottish contention that we need for Europe. And let's face it, he's at the age of 24 now, where he's not going to improve much as a player. Look, he would walk into any other team in the SPFL, but I think I put him in the sort of Stuart Armstrong bracket, where I could see him heading south to make some money over the next couple of years. Brendan Rodgers, you've got to remember, said, but I think over the next couple of windows, we'll get the squad down to a more workable group. So does that mean he's going to sell first team stars, or is it the fact that there's a lot of these players that have came into Celtic are just not going to cut the mustard and they will be shipped out again? If not on loan, on full-time deals. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about that? That was massive news from Brendan Rodgers in the print media this morning, and the fact that players did want away last summer. And one last piece of interesting news that's came out of Celtic this week. Just before we go, we're going to leave this on a high, because a lot of players have been saying, a lot of fans have been saying that James Forrest is past it. At 32-year-old, you've got to remember, and that was around about the same age that Scott Brown was when Brendan Rodgers came to the club back in 2016. And it could be the fact that he could completely revive James Forrest as a player. Now, was James Forrest one of the players that maybe wanted away at the summer? You've got to remember that James has had a new deal. Is he a player that maybe wanted away due to the lack of game time under the previous manager? But data, yeah, you know how the Celtic backroom staff love their data. Data from Lennoxtown suggests that James Forrest is faster than Dyson Myler. He's still one of the fastest players in the squad, and maybe that's why Brendan Rodgers has been picking him. When it comes down to raw data, you know that Brendan Rodgers is a man that likes to look at tactics and likes to look at all the information, gather all the information that he has available to him as a manager. And for raw pace, I can't get over this, I'm saying this at this time, James Forrest is still the quickest winger. He's up there with Dyson Myler in terms of sheer speed. On that note, have a fantastic day, Celtic fans all around the world.
Lit. Roll up to the party, roll up to the party, roll up to the